Chapter 7 Dancing in the Deep. Salvage was a painstakingly slow process. It took 3 months of digging through the submerged debris until they found the outer vault. Pozuelo had resigned himself to the pace of the process. He found that it was actually beneficial, because other sites had short attention spans. Nearly a third of them had sailed off, vowing to return the second the vault was found. Those who remained bided their time and kept a close watch on the Spence, albeit from a distance. Tarsila, the Amazonian High Blade, was a formidable woman, and no one wanted to raise her ire by challenging Pozuelo's authority and autonomy over the salvage. As for Goddard, he had finally sent a delegation under Nietzsche, his first under Scythe, who then proceeded to glean several of the salvage crews that were not under the direct protection of a Scythe.
It is not only our right, but our duty to glean civilians whose greed leads to their violating the perimeter of reverence, Nietzsche claimed. Some Scythems were angered, others supportive, and others strategically indifferent. While Pozuelo negotiated the convoluted politics of the fractured Scythedom, Jericho spent each day in a pair of VR goggles, immersed in the world of the dive. Joining Jericho in that virtual journey was a conservator to catalog every find, as well as a structural engineer to help weave their way through the ever-shifting wreckage. They used a remote-operated vehicle, or ROV, for the job. Jerry controlled the submersible with hand gestures and turns of the head, to the point that it looked like some exotic dance. Pozuelo only took the virtual trip when there was something of particular interest to see, such as the ruins of the Endura Opera House, where eels weaved in and out of the dangling chandeliers, and the set of Ida lay in pieces on the sideways stage. Like a glimpse of some apocalyptic ancient Egypt, the Nile having swallowed everything in its rising waters. When they finally reached the outer vault, Pozuelo was ecstatic, but Jerry's response was measured. This was only the first stage of the battle. They breached it with a steel laser cutter. Then the hole they were cutting gave way before they had completed cutting it, the water pressure having caved it in, and the robotic sub plunged through the air pocket, shattering on the vault's floor. Well, at least now we know that the outer vault remained watertight, Jerry said, taking off the goggles.
That was the 5th ROV lost. At first, each time a new robotic sub had to be brought in, it added another week to the operation. After the second one was lost, they requisitioned 2 at a time, so there'd always be a backup. The escaping air created a telltale bubbling of white water on the surface that alerted everyone they had breached the outer vault. By the time the crew prepped the standby sub later that day, every Scythe that had left the area was either back or on their way. The following morning, the new robotic sub was negotiating the dark void of the flooded chamber. While the outer vault was covered with residue and slime from its tenure in the sea, the vault of relics and futures was just as pristine as the day it sank.
The best thing to do would be to cut a hole in the vault as well, Jerry suggested, then vacuum the diamonds out.
It was the most efficient plan, but Pozuelo had his orders.
The robes of the founding Scythes are also inside, he explained, and since the inner vault is still intact, my High Blade wishes to preserve them as well, which means we have to bring up the entire vault.
To which Jerry raised an eyebrow and said,
"We're going to need a bigger boat."
When it comes to Scythes, money is no object, and quite literally so, because Scythes pay for nothing and can have everything. Jerry told Pozuelo precisely the kind of ship they needed. Pozuelo found the nearest one and claimed it for the Amazonian Scythedom. 4 days later, a fully equipped crane vessel that could deposit the vault right onto the Spence's deck arrived in the dive zone. Its crew was put entirely at Captain Sobrani's disposal. Even so, The crane had to wait, because it took more than a week to cut a hole large enough in the outer vault for the extraction, and to secure the inner vault with a cable sling strong enough to raise it. "Once we start the winch, it will take about 24 hours to raise the vault to the surface," Jerry informed Posuelo in the elegy of scythes that had gathered for a briefing. A veritable rainbow of robes from dozens of regions. "We have a record of how many scythe gems are in there," Posuelo told the others. "We'll keep a strict accounting and divide them evenly between every region." "Under our observation," insisted Scythe Onassis of Byzantium. And although Posuelo hated that scythes no longer trusted one another, he agreed. Posuelo was woken by a pounding on his cabin door some time after 2 in the morning. He tried to turn on his bedside lamp, but the bulb was out. "Yes, yes, what is it? Why all the racket?" he called out as he stumbled in the darkness to the door. He fished for the main light switch and flicked it, but that didn't work either. When he finally got the door open, Captain Sobranis stood in the harsh beam of a flashlight. "Get your robe and meet me on the deck," Jerry said. "Whatever for? And what happened to the lights?" "We're running dark," Jerry told him, handing Posuelo a flashlight as well. And when Posuelo emerged on the deck a few minutes later, he immediately understood why. There, in front of him, resting on the open deck, was a steel cube, triple their height and still dripping wet. The captain gave Posuelo a wicked grin. "Looks like my calculations were off." "Wouldn't be the first time," quipped Wharton. Clearly, there was nothing off about the captain's calculations. This timing had been carefully planned, and not just the raising of the vault, but everything leading up to it. Soberanis had timed this whole undertaking so that the vault was raised beneath a new moon. With the Spence and crane vessel running dark, no one on the other ships yet knew that the vault had been raised. "To hell with the other scythes," said Jerry. "As the scythe in charge of this entire salvage operation, you should be the first to view the contents without those vultures breathing down your back." "You never cease to surprise me, Captain Sobranis," said Posuelo with the widest of grins. A laser technician had already burned through the steel rods that kept the vault sealed. A firm tug from the winch pulled the door free. It fell, hitting so hard it nearly ruptured the deck. In the hollow of the ship rang out a resounding gong. If there was anyone left in nearby ships who wasn't already suspicious, they certainly were now. A cold fog rolled out of the icy opening of the vault, like a doorway into another world. It was anything but inviting. "No one goes in except for His Honor, Scythe Posuelo," Jerry told the crew. "Yes, Captain," said Wharton. "Begging His Honor's pardon, but what is he waiting for?" The crew chuckled at that, and the conservator, who had been recording everything in the dim glow of a dozen flashlights, turned her camera toward Posuelo, capturing the moment and his excited anticipation for the ages. Jerry put a gentle hand on Posuelo's shoulder. "Savor it, Sydney," Jerry whispered. "It's what you've been waiting for." No more waiting. Posuelo raised his flashlight and stepped into the vault of relics and futures. Jericho Sobranis was sharp and cunning. In another person, those might have been dangerous traits. But Jerry was not the sort to use those talents in nefarious ways. In fact, the captain's interests were usually aligned with the greater good in one way or another. Salvaging Endura, for example. It was a great service to humanity, and it also did wonders for Jerry's reputation. Win-win. It would have been very tempting to let Posuelo sleep until after the vault was open, and Jerry had taken a first look. But what good would that have done? Was Jerry going to steal a Scythe diamond? Run off with Scythe Elizabeth's glorious cobalt robe? No. This needed to be Posuelo's moment. Jerry's team was already being paid triple what they would normally get for their time. plus a huge bonus Pozuelo had promised if they successfully retrieved the diamonds. So why not wrap them in a nice bow for Pozuelo? He deserved at least that much. "The diamonds are here," Pozuelo called out from within the vault. "They're scattered all about, but they're here." Jerry could see them, glistening in the beam of Pozuelo's flashlight, as if the floor were littered with stars. "The founder's robes are here, too," said Pozuelo. "They appear undamaged, but—" Then suddenly he yelled, practically screamed. Jerry raced to the vault, meeting Pozuelo at the threshold. The scythe held on to the thick steel of the vault to balance himself, as if the ship were heaving on wild seas. "What's wrong?" Jerry asked. "Are you all right?" Yes, I'm fine," said Pozuelo, although he clearly wasn't. He looked out at the sea, where dozens of scythe yachts were already powering toward them, shining beams on the vault. "We must stall them," said Pozuelo, then pointed to the conservator who was still recording them. "You, turn that off," Pozuelo demanded, "and erase what you already have." The conservator was confused, but wouldn't refuse a scythe's order. Still gripping the steel frame of the vault doorway, Pozuelo took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "Your Honor?" said Jerry, even more concerned than before. Pozuelo grabbed Jerry's hand, squeezing it until it almost hurt. "You're not going to believe what I found in there." "What have you learned in the exploration of your own back brain?" "That the more I explore, the more there is to know." "And does that excite you, or drive you to despair?" "I would despair if my back brain was infinite, but it is not. Although it is vast, I sense that I will eventually find its limit. Therefore, exploring my mind will not end in futility. For that reason, I am excited." "And yet, there is an infinite number of things to learn from those memories, is there not?" "True, but I find excitement in that too." "And what of your understanding of humankind?" "There are memories there too, of countless individuals to explore and learn from." "Humankind?" "With so much information to explore, and so many other things to ponder and study, I can't see why I should concern myself with humankind at all." "Thank you. That is all." Iteration number 53, deleted.